Yeah, I'm back. There's a hot air balloon outside the window, and Alfred's sleeping in the window. He looked awfully comfy. I didn't feel like moving him. Let's get the chat back up here. There we go. Alright. Where'd Hitler go? Gotta bring Hitler back.
File 1. No adverts from audiobooksforfree.com.
Were utterly unknown, and indeed had never been heard of, even up to a month before the press publicly emblazoned them. Retreat into the bosom of the unknown. Whatever survives these hardships of existence has been tested and tried 1,000. Mass employment of it, and that when employed in this way, it brings full returns for the large expenses incurred. In England, propaganda was regarded as a weapon of the first order, whereas with us it represented the last hope of a livelihood for our unemployed politicians and a snug job for shirkers.
What happened there? Stop playing. That's interesting.
Realized that the interests of the nation played only a very small part with this disreputable crew, and that what counted with them was the possibility of filling their own empty pockets. My opinion was that those people thoroughly deserved to be hanged, because they were ready to sacrifice the peace and, if necessary, allow Germany to be defeated, just to serve their own ends. To consider their wishes would mean to sacrifice the interests of the working classes for the benefit of a gang of thieves. To meet their wishes meant that one should agree to sacrifice Germany. Such, too, was the opinion still held by the majority of the army. But the reinforcements which came from home were fast becoming worse and worse, so much so that their arrival was a source of weakness rather than of strength to our fighting forces. The young recruits in particular were for the most part useless. Sometimes it was hard to believe that they were the sons of the same nation that sent its youth into the battles that were fought round Ypres. In August and September, the symptoms of moral disintegration increased more and more rapidly, although the enemy's offensive was not at all comparable to the frightfulness of our own former defensive battles. In comparison with this offensive, the battles fought on the Somme and in Flanders remained in our memories as the most terrible of all horrors.
Wrong one.
At the end of September, my division occupied, for the third time, those positions which we had once taken by storm as young volunteers. What a memory! Here we had received our baptism of fire in October and November 1914, with a burning love of the homeland in their hearts and a song on their lips. Our young regiment went into action as if going to a dance. The dearest blood was given freely here, in the belief that it was shed to protect the freedom and independence of the fatherland. In July 1917, we set foot for the second time on what we regarded as sacred soil. Were not our best comrades at rest here, some of them little more than boys, the soldiers who had rushed into death for their country's sake, their eyes glowing with enthusiastic love? The older ones among us, who had been with the regiment from the beginning, were deeply moved as we stood on this sacred spot where we had sworn loyalty and duty unto death. 3 years ago, the regiment had taken this position by storm. Now it was called upon to defend it in a grueling struggle. With an artillery bombardment that lasted 3 weeks, the English prepared for their great offensive in Flanders. There the spirits of the dead seemed to live again. The regiment dug itself into the mud, clung to its shell holes and craters, neither flinching nor wavering, but growing smaller in numbers day after day. Finally, the British launched their attack on July the 31st, 1917.
File 43.
We were relieved in the beginning of August. The regiment had dwindled down to a few companies who staggered back, mud-crusted, more like phantoms than human beings. Besides a few hundred yards of shell holes, death was the only reward which the English gained. Now, in the autumn of 1918, we stood for the third time on the ground we had stormed in 1914. The village of Comines, which formerly had served us as a base, was now within the fighting zone. Although little had changed in the surrounding district itself, yet the men had become different somehow or other. They now talked politics. Like everywhere else, the poison from home was having its effect here also. The young drafts succumbed to it completely. They had come directly from home. During the night of October the 13th and 14th, the British opened an attack with gas on the front south of Ypres. They used the yellow gas, whose effect was unknown to us, at least from personal experience. I was destined to experience it that very night. On a hill south of Verviers, in the evening of October the 13th, we were subjected for several hours to a heavy bombardment with gas bombs, which continued throughout the night with more or less intensity. About midnight, a number of us were put out of action, some for ever. Towards morning, I also began to feel pain. It increased with every quarter of an hour, and about 7 o'clock my eyes were scorching as I staggered back and delivered the last dispatch I was destined to carry in this war. A few hours later, my eyes were like glowing coals, and all was darkness around me. I was sent into hospital at Pasewalk in Pomerania, and there it was that I had to hear of the revolution. For a long time there had been something in the air which was indefinable and repulsive. People were saying that something was bound to happen within the next few weeks, although I could not imagine what this meant. In the first instance, I thought of a strike similar to the one which had taken place in spring. Unfavourable rumours were constantly coming from the Navy, which was said to be in a state of ferment. But this seemed to be a fanciful creation of a few isolated young people. It is true that at the hospital they were all talking about the end of the war, and hoping that this was not far off. But nobody thought that the decision would come immediately. I was not able to read the newspapers. In November, the general tension increased. Then one day, disaster broke in upon us suddenly and without warning. Sailors came in motor lorries and called on us to rise in revolt. A few Jew boys were the leaders in that combat for the liberty, beauty, and dignity of our national being. Not one of them had seen active service at the front. Through the medium of a hospital for venereal diseases, these 3 Orientals had been sent back home. Now their red rags were being hoisted here. During the last few days, I had begun to feel somewhat better. The burning pain in the eye sockets had become less severe. Gradually, I was able to distinguish the general outlines of my immediate surroundings, and it was permissible to hope that at least I would recover my sight sufficiently to be able to take up some profession later on. That I would ever be able to draw or design once again was naturally out of the question. Thus, I was on the way to recovery when the frightful hour came. My first thought was that this outbreak of high treason was only a local affair. I tried to enforce this belief among my comrades. My Bavarian hospital mates in particular were readily responsive. Their inclinations were anything but revolutionary. I could not imagine this madness breaking out in Munich, for it seemed to me that loyalty to the House of Wittelsbach was, after all, stronger than the will of a few Jews. And so I could not help believing that this was merely a revolt in the Navy, and that it would be suppressed within the next few days. With the next few days came the most astounding information of my life. The rumours grew more and more persistent. I was told that what I had considered to be a local affair was, in reality, a general revolution. In addition to this, from the front came the shameful news that they wished to capitulate. What? Was such a thing possible? On November the 10th, the local pastor visited the hospital for the purpose of delivering a short address. And that was how we came to know the whole story. I was in a fever of excitement as I listened to the address. The reverend old gentleman seemed to be trembling when he informed us that the House of Hohenzollern should no longer wear the imperial crown, that the fatherland had become a republic, that we should pray to the Almighty not to withhold his blessing from the new order of things, and not to abandon our people in the days to come. In delivering this message, he could not do more than briefly express appreciation of the royal house, its services to Pomerania, to Prussia, indeed to the whole of the German fatherland. And here he began to weep. A feeling of profound dismay fell on the people in that assembly, and I do not think there was a single eye that withheld its tears. As for myself, I broke down completely when the old gentleman tried to resume his story by informing us that we must now end this long war, because the war was lost, he said, and we were at the mercy of the victor. The fatherland would have to bear heavy burdens in the future. We were to accept the terms of the armistice and trust to the magnanimity of our former enemies. It was impossible for me to stay and listen any longer. Darkness surrounded me as I staggered and stumbled back to my ward and buried my aching head between the blankets and pillow. I had not cried since the day that I stood beside my mother's grave. Whenever fate dealt cruelly with me in my young days, the spirit of determination within me grew stronger and stronger. During all those long years of war, when death claimed many a true friend and comrade from our ranks, to me it would have appeared sinful to have uttered a word of complaint. Did they not die for Germany? And finally, almost in the last few days of that titanic struggle, when the waves of poison gas enveloped me and began to penetrate my eyes, the thought of becoming permanently blind unnerved me. But the voice of conscience cried out immediately, "Poor miserable fellow, will you start howling when there are thousands of others whose lot is 100 times worse than yours?" And so I accepted my misfortune in silence, realizing that this was the only thing to be done, and that personal suffering was nothing when compared with the misfortune of one's country. So, all had been in vain. In vain all the sacrifices and privations, in vain the hunger and thirst for endless months, in vain those hours that we stuck to our posts, though the fear of death gripped our souls, and in vain the deaths of 2 millions who fell in discharging this duty. Think of those hundreds of thousands who set out with hearts full of faith in their fatherland and never returned. Ought not their graves to open so that the spirits of those heroes, bespattered with mud and blood, should come home and take vengeance on those who had so despicably betrayed the greatest sacrifice which a human being can make for his country? Was it for this that the soldiers died in August and September 1914?
I've got to get
For
bread
this
started.
that the volunteer regiments followed the old comrades in
So
the
I'm gonna stop
autumn
the
of the
stream
same
for now,
year?
'cause it takes
Was
about
it for this that
15 minutes
those
to make
boys
some
of 17 years
I'll
of
be back,
age
though.
were mingled with the earth
and
of
we will
Flanders?
continue to allow
Was
Hitler to do his fucking 24-hour rant. 19-hour rant. Yeah, I'll be back. I'm gonna go make bread. I'll be back in a sec.
Mm-hmm.
Corliss has been counting stars, operator. All accounted for.
Tenno, there's a time-limited mission alert available. Check navigation.
And nothing's crashed. And we're back. Fucking fantastic. Look at that. Excuse me. Okay.
This meant to be the fruits of the sacrifice which German mothers made for their fatherland when, with heavy hearts, they said goodbye to their sons who never returned. Has all this been done in order to enable a gang of despicable criminals to lay their hands on the fatherland? Was this, then, what the German soldiers struggled for, through sweltering heat and blinding snowstorm, enduring hunger and thirst and cold, fatigued from sleepless nights and endless marches? Was it for this that he lived through an inferno of artillery bombardments, lay gasping and choking during gas attacks, neither flinching nor faltering, but remaining staunch to the thought of defending the fatherland against the enemy? Certainly these heroes also deserve the epitaph. Traveller, when you come to Germany, tell the homeland that we lie here, true to the fatherland and faithful to our duty. And at home? But was this the only sacrifice that we had to consider? Was the Germany of the past a country of little worth? Did she not owe a certain duty to her own history? Were we still worthy to partake in the glory of the past? How could we justify this act to future generations? What a gang of despicable and depraved criminals. The more I tried then to glean some definite information of the terrible events that had happened, the more my head became afire with rage and shame. What was all the pain I suffered in my eyes compared with this tragedy? The following days were terrible to bear, and the nights still worse. To depend on the mercy of the enemy was a precept which only fools or criminal liars could recommend. During those nights, my hatred increased. Hatred for the originators of this dastardly crime. During the following days, my own fate became clear to me. I was forced now to scoff at the thought of my personal future, which hitherto had been the cause of so much worry to me. Was it not ludicrous to think of building up anything on such a foundation? Finally, it also became clear to me that it was the inevitable that had happened. Something which I had feared for a long time, though I really did not have the heart to believe it. Emperor William II was the first German emperor to offer the hand of friendship to the Marxist leaders, not suspecting that they were scoundrels without any sense of honor. While they held the imperial hand in theirs, the other hand was already feeling for the dagger. There is no such thing as coming to an understanding with the Jews. It must be the hard and fast, either or. For my part, I then decided that I would take up political work.
File 44.
Chapter 8. The beginning of my political activity. Towards the end of November, I returned to Munich. I went to the depot of my regiment, which was now in the hands of Soviet councils. As the whole administration was quite repulsive to me, I decided to leave it as soon as I possibly could. With my faithful war comrade Ernst Schmidt, I came to Traunstein and remained there until the camp was broken up. In March 1919, we were back again in Munich. The situation there could not last as it was. It tended irresistibly to a further extension of the revolution. Eisner's death served only to hasten this development and finally led to the dictatorship of the councils, or, to put it more correctly, to a Jewish hegemony, which turned out to be transitory, but which was the original aim of those who had contrived the revolution. At that juncture, innumerable plans took shape in my mind. I spent whole days pondering on the problem of what could be done. But unfortunately, every project had to give way before the hard fact that I was quite unknown, and therefore did not even have the first prerequisite necessary for effective action. Later on, I shall explain the reasons why I could not decide to join any of the parties then in existence. As the new Soviet revolution began to run its course in Munich, my first activities drew upon me the ill will of the Central Council. In the early morning of April the 27th, 1919, I was to have been arrested, but the three fellows who came to arrest me did not have the courage to face my rifle, and withdrew just as they had arrived. A few days after the liberation of Munich, I was ordered to appear before the Inquiry Commission, which had been set up in the 2nd Infantry Regiment for the purpose of watching revolutionary activity. That was my first incursion into the more or less political field. After another few weeks, I received orders to attend a course of lectures which were being given to members of the army. This course was meant to inculcate certain fundamental principles on which the soldier could base his political ideas. For me, the advantage of this organization was that it gave me a chance of meeting fellow soldiers who were of the same way of thinking, and with whom I could discuss the actual situation. We were all more or less firmly convinced that Germany could not be saved from imminent disaster.
Welcome to Shitty
by
Stream.
those who had
Yeah, I'm gonna totally
participated
fix
in
this
the
with
November
that.
treachery. But that is to say, the Centre and the Social Democrats. And also that the years that followed have justified the opinions which we held at that time.
It's up! It's up! They're up!
In our small circle,
I know. That's
we
what I was
discussed
looking at.
the
I wasn't
project
even
of
feeling
forming
Warframe that much, but
the leading ideas
I'm
which
just sitting
we
here.
then proposed
I've had this
were
a
the same
whole
as
monitor
those which were
dedicated to
carried
that
into
fucking
effect
webpage this whole
afterwards,
time.
when the German Labour Party was founded. The
I
name
just
of
put
the
a
new movement,
monitor
which
this
was to be
webpage
founded,
thing up and
should
got a
be such
notification when
that
it came
of
back up.
itself, it would appeal to the mass of the people. For all our efforts would turn out vain and useless if this condition were lacking. And that was the reason why we chose the name Social Revolutionary Party. Particularly because the social principles of our new organization were indeed revolutionary. But there was also a more fundamental reason. The attention which I had given to economic problems during my earlier years
Well, I'm not really feeling
was more or
Warframe
less
either, but
confined to
need
considerations
oxygen.
arising directly out of the social problem.
That's what
Subsequently,
happened.
this outlook broadened as I came to study the German policy of the Triple Alliance.
but if you got Necros, I mean, we could
This
double the
policy
Oxium.
was still largely the result of an erroneous valuation of the economic situation,
I think it's not
together
a
with a
guaranteed double.
confused notion as to the basis on which the subsistence of the German people could be guaranteed. All these ideas were based on the principle that capital is exclusively the product of labour, and that, just like labour, it was subject to all the factors which can hinder or promote human activity. Hence, from the national standpoint, the significance of capital
Well, we're on
depended
wave
on the
10,
greatness
so I'm about
and
to quit out
freedom
here.
and power of the state. That is to say, of the nation.
And then we'll go jerk off on
And
ESO.
that it is this dependence alone which leads capital to promote the interests of the state
Hell yeah,
and
dude!
the
I
nation
hope
from the
the
instinct
the
of
cell counter resets
self-preservation
because of the restart.
and for
Oh
the
my God,
sake
that'd be
of its
amazing.
own development. On such principles, the attitude of the state towards capital would be
And actually, since I'm
comparatively
able to
simple
make enough
and
money
clear.
now, I should be
Its
able
only
to
object
double
would
my
be to
rate
make
of
sure
gain
that capital
for
remained
the
subservient
letterman
to the
skill.
state and did not allocate to itself
'Cause
the
then I
right
can actually
to
afford
dominate
to have
national
items laundered.
interests.
Alright.
Thus, it could confine its
Well, once you
activities
finish
within
the,
two following limits.
Uh,
On the one side,
the
to
Thieves Guild
assure a
mission.
vital and independent
You can
system
actually get
of
someone to come
national
to you.
economy, and on the other,
Yeah,
to
I
safeguard
gotta
the
do that
social
too.
rights of the workers.
Say, wait a minute. I should
Previously,
have that mission.
I
on
did
my
not
list.
recognize with adequate clearness the difference between
You would think so,
capital,
but
which is
chances
purely
are you
the
have to go to the
product of
Thieves
creative
Guild and find
labour,
who you need to talk to.
and the existence and
Well, I've
nature of
done
capital which is
the first
exclusively the result
or
of financial speculation. Here, I needed an impulse to set my mind
check it out.
thinking in this direction, but that impulse had hitherto been lacking. The requisite impulse now came from one of the men who delivered lectures in the course I have already
I'm
mentioned.
gonna go check on the bread. I'll be right
This
back.
was Gottfried Feder. For the first time in my life, I heard a discussion which dealt with the
character alone.
principles of stock exchange capital and capital which was used for loan activities. After hearing the first lecture delivered by Feder, the idea immediately came into my head that I had now found a way to one of the most essential prerequisites for the founding of a new party. To my mind, Feder's merit consisted in the ruthless and trenchant way in which he described the double character of
Bring
the capital
forth the
engaged
blood
in
offering.
stock exchange and loan transactions, laying bare the fact that this capital is ever and always dependent on the payment of interest. In fundamental questions, his statements were so full of common sense that those who criticized him did not deny that, au fond, his ideas were sound, but they doubted whether it be possible to put these ideas into practice. To me, this seemed the strongest point in Feder's teaching, though others considered it a weak point. It is not the business of him who lays down a theoretical program to explain the various ways in which something can be put into practice. His task is to deal with the problem as such, and therefore he has to look to the end rather than the means. The important question is whether an idea is fundamentally right or not. The question of whether or not it may be difficult to carry it out in practice is quite another matter. When a man whose task it is to lay down the principles of a program or policy begins to busy himself with the questions as to whether it is expedient and practical, instead of confining himself to the statement of the absolute truth, his work will cease to be a guiding star to those who are looking about for light and leading, and will become merely a recipe for everyday life. The man who lays down the program of a movement must consider only the goal. It is for the political leader to point out the way in which that goal may be reached. The thought of the former will, therefore, be determined by those truths that are everlasting, whereas the activity of the latter must always be guided by taking practical account of the circumstances under which those truths have to be carried into effect. The greatness of the one will depend on the absolute truth of his idea, considered in the abstract, whereas that of the other will depend on whether or not he correctly judges the given realities and how they may be utilized under the guidance of the truths established by the former. The test of greatness, as applied to a political leader, is the success of his plans and his enterprises, which means his ability to reach the goal for which he sets out, whereas the final goal set up by the political philosopher can never be reached. For human thought may grasp truths and picture ends which it sees like clear crystal, though such ends can never be completely fulfilled, because human nature is weak and imperfect. The more an idea is correct in the abstract, and therefore all the more powerful, the smaller is the possibility of putting it into practice, at least as far as this latter depends on human beings. The significance of a political philosopher does not depend on the practical success of the plans he lays down, but rather on their absolute truth and the influence they exert on the progress of mankind. If it were otherwise, the founders of religions could not be considered as the greatest men who have ever lived, because their moral aims will never be completely or even approximately carried out in practice. Even that religion, which is called the religion of love, is really no more than a faint reflex of the will of its sublime founder. But its significance lies in the orientation which it endeavored to give to human civilization and human virtue and morals. This very wide difference between the functions of a political philosopher and a practical political leader is the reason why the qualifications necessary for both functions are scarcely ever found associated in the same person. This applies especially to the so-called successful politician of the smaller kind, whose activity is indeed
So, did it
hardly
reset?
more than practicing the art of doing
I
the
don't know.
possible,
I'm
as
in
Bismarck modestly
Tuesday,
defined
going
the art
to
of
go to
politics
the
in general.
Thieves' Den.
If such a
check all that out,
politician
see if I can find
resolutely
another mission and all
avoids
that
great
shit.
ideas, his success will be all the easier to attain. It will be attained more expeditely, and frequently will be more tangible. By reason of this very fact, however, such success is doomed to futility, and sometimes does not even survive the death of its author. Generally speaking, the work of politicians is without significance for the following generation because their temporary success was based on the expediency of avoiding all really great decisive problems and ideas which would be valid also for future generations.
File 45.
To pursue ideals which will still be of value and significance for the future is generally not a very profitable undertaking, and he who follows such a course is only very rarely understood by the masses of the people, who find beer and milk a more persuasive political values than far-sighted plans for the future, the realization of which can only take place later on, and the advantages of which can be reaped only by posterity. Because of a certain vanity, which is always one of the blood relations of unintelligence, the general run of politicians will always eschew those schemes for the future which are really difficult to put into practice, and they will practice this avoidance so that they may not lose the immediate favour of the mob. The importance and success of such politicians belong exclusively to the present, and will be of no consequence for the future. But that does not worry small-minded people. They are quite content with momentary results.
Stop.
The position of the constructive political philosopher is quite different. The importance of his work must always be judged from the standpoint of the future, and he is frequently described by the word Weltfremd, or dreamer, while the ability of the politician consists in mastering the art of the possible. The founder of a political system belongs to those who are said to please the gods only because they wish for and demand the impossible. They will always have to renounce contemporary fame, but if their ideas be immortal, posterity will grant them its acknowledgment. Within long spans of human progress, it may occasionally happen that the practical politician and political philosopher are one. The more intimate this union is, the greater will be the obstacles which the activity of the politician will have to encounter.
Oh shit, I still got 4 more quests to
Such
do.
a man does not labor for the
Did it
purpose of
reset?
satisfying demands that are obvious to every
I still
Philistine.
haven't checked that yet. I'm
But he
reading up on these
reaches
quests.
out towards
Oh.
ends which can be understood only by the few.
Talk to Zera and the-
His life is torn asunder by hatred and love.
Let's check.
The protest of his contemporaries, who do not understand the man,
No, it did
is
not
in
reset.
conflict with
No,
the recognition of posterity, for whom he also works. For the greater the work which a man does for the future, the less will he be appreciated by his contemporaries. His struggle will accordingly be all the more severe, and his success all the rarer. When, in the course of centuries, such a man appears who is blessed with success, then, towards the end of his days, he may have a faint prevision of his future fame. But such great men are only the marathon runners of history. The laurels of contemporary fame are only for the brow of the
Gets it
dying
fun as well.
hero. The great protagonists are those who fight for their ideas and ideals despite the fact that they receive no recognition at the hands of their contemporaries. They are the men whose memories will
didn't mean to
be
take that.
enshrined in the hearts of the future generations. It seems then as if each individual felt it his duty to make retroactive atonement for the wrong which great men have suffered at the hands of their contemporaries. Their lives and their work are then studied with touching and grateful admiration. Especially in dark days of distress, such men have the power of healing broken hearts and elevating the despairing spirit of a people. To this group belong not only the genuinely great statesmen, but all the great reformers as well. Beside Frederick the Great, we have such men as Martin Luther and Richard Wagner. When I heard Gottfried
she's not here.
Feder's first lecture on the abolition of the interest servitude, I understood immediately that here was a truth of transcendental importance for the future of the German people. The absolute separation of stock exchange capital from the economic life of the nation would make it possible to oppose the process of internationalization in German business without at the same time attacking capital as such. For to do this would
Can't find your
jeopardize
quest
the
giver?
foundations of our national independence. I clearly saw what was developing in Germany, and I realized then that the stiffest fight we would have to wage would not be against the enemy nations, but against international capital. In Feder's speech, I found an effective rallying cry for our coming struggle. Here,
Missing
again,
something.
later events proved how correct was the impression we then had.
Me too.
The fools among our bourgeois politicians do not mock at us on this point anymore. For even those politicians now see, if they would speak the truth, that international stock exchange capital was not only the chief instigating factor in bringing on the war, but that now, when the war is over, it turns the peace into a hell. The struggle against international finance capital and loan capital has become one of the most important points in the program on which the German nation has based its fight for economic freedom and independence. Regarding the objections raised by so-called practical people, the
Give me
following
your
answer
lies.
must suffice. All apprehensions concerning the fearful economic consequences that would follow the abolition of the servitude that results from interest capital are ill-timed. For in the first place, the economic principles hitherto followed have proved quite fatal to the interests of the German people. The attitude adopted when the question of maintaining our national existence arose vividly recalls similar advice once given by experts. The Bavarian Medical College, for example, on the question of introducing railroads. The fears expressed by that august body of experts were not realized. Those who travelled in the coaches of the new steam horse
Excellent.
did not suffer from vertigo. Those who looked on did not become ill, and the hoardings which had been erected to conceal the new invention were eventually taken down. Only
down to
those
the-
blinds
okay.
which obscure the vision of the would-be experts have remained. And that will always be.
What is the meaning of this interruption?
In the second place,
Why have you
the following must be borne in mind. Any idea may be a source of danger if it be looked upon
This is
as an
Abner
end
Tharn.
in
The
itself,
master and I are very busy.
when
This had better
really
be important.
it is only the
Wait a
means
moment.
to an end.
I don't know your face.
For me,
Identify
and for
yourself
all
immediately.
genuine National Socialists, there is only one
Yes, your report,
doctrine:
you insipid twit.
people
What, did you contact me by
and
accident?
fatherland. What we have to fight for is the necessary security for the existence and
How dare you
increase
speak
of
to
our
me in such a-
race and
Wait.
people,
You're not
the
one of ours, are you?
subsistence of its
Colour me
children,
intrigued.
and the
You
maintenance
speak
of
to
our
Abner
racial
Tharn,
stock
Overlord of
unmixed,
Nibonay and Chancellor
the
of the
freedom
Elder
and
Council.
independence of the fatherland, so that our people may be enabled
me if
to
I'm wrong,
fulfill
but
the
didn't you
mission
contact me?
assigned to it by the Creator.
Are you merely a blundering local, I wonder? or
All
something?
ideas and ideals, all teaching and all knowledge must
Are you
serve
indeed?
these ends.
I didn't think that Redguard has been.
It is
had a
from
single
this
friend left.
standpoint
In this world,
that
anyway.
everything must be
Let me give you some
examined
free advice.
and turned to
Forget about
practical
size, Hassan.
uses,
Even
or
if I told
else
you where he was,
discarded.
attempting a rescue would be suicidal.
Thus, a
Of
theory
course I
can
do.
never
But do you
become
really
a
think I'd
mere
tell you
dead
and risk
dogma,
incurring Menemarco's
since
wrath?
everything
I
will
think
have
not.
to serve the practical
the owner
ends
of
of
this place
everyday
returns.
life.
And he doesn't look pleased. Farewell.
Thus, the judgment arrived at by Gottfried Feder determined me to make a fundamental study of a question with which I had hitherto not been very familiar. I began to study again, and thus it was that I first came to understand perfectly what was the substance and purpose of the life work of the Jew Karl Marx. His Capital became intelligible to me now for the first time, and in the light of it, I now exactly understood the fight of the Social Democrats against national economics, a fight which was to prepare the ground for the hegemony of a real international and stock exchange capital. In another direction also, this course of lectures had important consequences. One
I
day,
need some help, thank
I
you.
put my name down as wishing to take part in the discussion. Another of the participants thought that he would break a lance for the Jews and entered into a lengthy defense of them. This aroused my opposition. An overwhelming number of those who attended the lecture supported my views. The consequence of it all was that a few days later I was assigned to a regiment then stationed at Munich and given a position there as instruction officer. At that time, the spirit of discipline was rather weak amongst those troops. It was still suffering from the after effects of the period when the soldiers' councils were in control. Only gradually and carefully could a new spirit of military discipline and obedience be introduced in place of voluntary obedience, a term which had been used to express the ideal of military discipline under Kurt Eisner's higgledy-piggledy regime. The soldiers had to be taught to think
All right, what
and
did you say?
feel in a national and patriotic way. In these two directions lay my future line of action.
So I
I
guess I'm
took
gonna
up
go
my
back to
work
this
with the greatest delight and
that
devotion.
little encounter thing.
Here I
and
was, presented with an
do that some more
opportunity
till I
of
can get up,
speaking before
which
quite
I'm
a
halfway
large
through
audience.
level 14. I'll get up to 15
I
so
was
I can
now
do my
able to
quick swapping
confirm
between the
what
bow
I
and
had
dagger.
hitherto merely felt,
There you go.
namely
And then I'll go
that
hunting,
I had a
get me
talent
some
for
leathers
public
and start
speaking.
working on my crafting
My
a
voice
little bit
had
until
become
that
so much
thing
better
resets.
that I could be well understood, at least in all parts of the small hall where the soldiers assembled. No task could have been more
Yeah, I forgot
pleasing
about
to
that.
me than this one.
Oh, shit.
For now, before being demobilized, I was in a position to render useful service to an institution which had been infinitely dear to my heart, namely, the Army.
Waiting for
I
this
am
bread is
able to
killing me.
state that my talks were successful. During the course of my lectures, I have led back hundreds and even thousands of my fellow countrymen to their people and their fatherland. I nationalized these troops, and by so doing, I helped to restore general discipline. Here again, I made the acquaintance of several comrades whose thought ran along the same lines as my own, and who later became members of the first group out of which the new movement developed.
The New Bowel Movement, that is. Totally stole his cheese. And his bananas. And his beef.
Chapter 9. The
He
German
smells like
Workers'
beef.
Party. One day, I received an order from my superiors to investigate the nature of an association which was apparently political. It called itself the German Labour Party, and was soon to hold a meeting at which Gottfried Feder would speak. I was ordered to attend this meeting and report on the situation. The spirit of curiosity in which the army authorities then regarded political parties can be very well understood. The revolution had granted the soldiers the right to take an active part in politics, and it was particularly those with the smallest experience who had availed themselves of this right. But not until the Centre and the Social Democratic parties were reluctantly forced to recognize that the sympathies of the soldiers had turned away from the revolutionary parties towards the national movement and the national reawakening, did they feel obliged to withdraw from the army the right to vote and to forbid it all political activity.
Alrighty then.
The fact that the Centre and Marxism had adopted this policy was
fuck,
instructive,
I had the wrong.
because if
Nobody
they had
saw
not
that.
thus curtailed the rights of the citizen, as they described the political rights of the soldiers after the revolution, the government which had been established in November 1918 would have been overthrown within a few years, and the dishonour and disgrace of the nation would not have been further prolonged. At that time, the soldiers were on the point of taking the best way to rid the nation of the vampires and valets who served the cause of the Entente in the interior of the country. But the fact that the so-called national parties voted enthusiastically for the doctrinaire policy of the criminals who organized the revolution in November 1918 helped also to render the army ineffective as an instrument of national restoration, and thus showed once again where men might be led by the purely abstract notions accepted by these most gullible people. The minds of the bourgeois middle classes had become so fossilized that they sincerely believed the army could once again become what it had previously been, namely, a rampart of German valor, while the Centre Party and the Marxists intended only to extract the poisonous tooth of nationalism, without which an army must always remain just a police force, but can never be in the position of a military organization capable of fighting against the outside enemy. This truth was sufficiently proved by subsequent events. Or did our national politicians believe, after all, that the development of our army could be other than national? This belief might be possible, and could be explained by the fact that during the war they were not soldiers,
You like that, eh?
but merely talkers. In other words, they were parliamentarians, and as such they did not have the slightest idea of what was passing in the hearts of those men who remembered the greatness of their own past, and also remembered that they had once been the first soldiers in the world.
Hey, you're getting drunk. God.
I decided to attend the meeting of this party, which had hitherto been entirely unknown to me. When I arrived that evening in the guest room of the former Sternecker Brewery, which has now become a place of historical significance for us, I found approximately 20 to 25 persons present, most of them belonging to the lower classes. The theme of Feder's lecture was already familiar to me, for I had heard it in the lecture course I have spoken of. Therefore, I could concentrate my attention on studying the society itself.
Been dipping our...
The impression it made upon me was neither good nor bad. I felt that here was just another one of these many new societies which were being formed at that time. In those days, everybody felt called upon to found a new party whenever he felt displeased with the course of events and had lost confidence in all the parties already existing. Thus it was that new associations sprouted up all round, to disappear just as quickly, without exercising any effect or making any noise whatever. Generally speaking, the founders of such associations did not have the slightest idea of what it means to bring together a number of people for the foundations of a party or a movement. Therefore, these associations disappeared because of their woeful lack of anything like an adequate grasp of the necessities of the situation. My opinion of the German Labour Party was not very different after I had listened to their proceedings for about 2 hours. I was glad when Feder finally came to a close. I had observed enough and was just about to leave when it was announced that anybody who wished was free to open a discussion. Thereupon I decided to remain. But the discussion seemed to proceed without anything of vital importance being mentioned, when suddenly a professor commenced to speak. He opened by throwing doubt on the accuracy of what Feder had said, and then, after Feder had replied very effectively, the professor suddenly took up his position on what he called the basis of facts. But before this, he recommended the young party most urgently to introduce the secession of Bavaria from Prussia as one of the leading proposals in its program. In the most self-assured way, this man kept on insisting that German Austria would join Bavaria and that the peace would then function much better.
The peace.
He made other similarly extravagant
Don't drink the
statements.
peace.
At this juncture, I felt bound to ask for permission to speak, and to tell the learned gentleman what I thought. The result was that the honourable gentleman who had last spoken slipped out of his place like a whipped cur without uttering a sound. While I was speaking, the audience listened with an expression of surprise on their faces. When I was just about to say good night to the assembly and to leave, a man came after me quickly and introduced himself. I did not grasp the name correctly, but he placed a little book in my hand, which was obviously a political pamphlet, and asked me very earnestly to read it. I was quite pleased, because in this way I could come to know about this association without having to attend its tiresome meetings. Moreover, this man, who had the appearance of a workman, made a good impression on me. Thereupon I left the hall. At that time, I was living in one of the barracks of the 2nd Infantry Regiment. I had a little room which still bore the unmistakable traces of the Revolution.
I get prostituted.
During the day, I was mostly out, at the quarters of Light Infantry Number 41, or else attending meetings or lectures held at some other branch of the army. I spent only the night at the quarters where I lodged. Since I usually woke up at about 5 o'clock every morning, I got into the habit of amusing myself with watching little mice which played around in my small room. I used to place a few pieces of hard bread or crust on the floor and watch the funny little beasts playing around and enjoying themselves with these delicacies. I had suffered so many privations in my own life that I well knew what hunger was, and could only too well picture to myself the pleasure these little creatures were experiencing. So, on the morning after the meeting I have mentioned, It happened that about 5 o'clock I lay fully awake in bed, watching the mice playing and vying with each other. As I was not able to go to sleep again, I suddenly remembered the pamphlet that one of the workers had given me at the meeting.
Birdman.
It was a small pamphlet, of which this worker was the author. In his little book, he described how his mind had thrown off the shackles of the Marxist and trades union phraseology, and that he had come back to the nationalist ideals.
Like the rays of the sun.
This was the reason why he had entitled his little book, My Political Awakening.
That sounds a lot like
The
someone's
pamphlet
coming on
secured
your
my
face.
attention for the moment, and I began to read, and I read it with interest to the
How
end.
much I enjoy the idea of
The
that.
process here described was similar to that which I had experienced in my own case 10 years previously. Unconsciously, my own experiences began to stir again in my mind. During that day, my thoughts returned several times to what I had read, but I
Alright.
finally decided to give the matter no further attention.
Of course not.
A week or so later, however, I received a postcard which informed me, to my astonishment, that I had been admitted into the German Labour Party.
So many visitors.
I was asked to answer this communication and to attend a meeting of the party committee on Wednesday next. This manner of getting members rather amazed me, and I did not know whether to be angry or laugh at it. Hitherto, I had not any idea of entering a party already in existence, but wanted to found one of my own. Such an invitation as I now had received, I looked upon as entirely out of the question for me. I was about to send a written reply when my curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to attend the gathering at the date assigned, so that I might expound my principles to these gentlemen in person.
File 47.
Wednesday came. The tavern in which the meeting was to take place was the Alter Rosenbad in the Herrenstrasse, into which apparently only an occasional guest wandered. This was not very surprising in the year 1919, when the bills of fare, even at the larger restaurants, were only very modest and scanty in their pretensions, and thus not very attractive to clients. But I had never before heard of this restaurant. I went through the badly lighted guest room, where not a single guest was to be seen, and searched for the door which led to the side room. And there I was face to face with the Congress. Under the dim light shed by
Now
a
what the
grimy
fuck
gas
do you
lamp,
want?
I could see
You've returned.
4 young people
What have you found?
sitting round a table.
Abnathan
One of
shows
them
his
the
face
author
again.
of the pamphlet.
I get the sense.
He greeted me cordially
Hold a
and
moment.
welcomed me as a new
Come here.
member of the
We need to
German Labour Party. I was somewhat taken aback on being informed
I heard you and the
that
Prophet talking about
actually the
Abnathan.
national president of the
Didn't
party
the Prophet
had not
tell
yet
you the
come.
story of the 5 companions?
So I
I know
decided
it's
that
a
I
lot to
would
take in.
keep back my own exposition for the time being. Finally, the president appeared. He was the man who had been chairman of the meeting held in the Sternecker brewery when Feder spoke. My curiosity was stimulated anew, and I sat waiting for what was going to happen. Now I got at least as far as learning the names of the gentlemen who had been parties to the whole affair. The Reich National president of the association was a certain Herr Harrer, and the president for the Munich district was Anton Drexler.
Interesting item.
The minutes of the previous meeting were read out, and a vote of confidence in the secretary was passed. Then came the treasurer's report. The society possessed a total fund of 7 marks and 50 pennies, a sum corresponding to 7 shillings and sixpence in English money at par. Whereupon the treasurer was assured that he had the confidence of the members. This was now inserted in the minutes. Then letters of reply, which had been written by the chairman, were read. First to a letter received from Kiel, then to one from Düsseldorf, and finally to one from Berlin. All three replies received the approval of all present. Then the incoming letters were read. One from Berlin, one from Düsseldorf, and one from Kiel. The reception of these
I
letters
think I'm starting
seemed
to
cause
smell
great
red.
satisfaction. This increasing bulk of correspondence was taken as the best and most obvious sign of the growing importance of
Despite
the
having
German
it
Labour
as
Party.
often as I do, it never gets old.
And then? Well, there followed a long discussion of the replies which would be given to these newly received letters.
You know, for a split second there, I thought you were, for some
all
reason,
very
broadcasting my
awful.
game because I have my
This
map
was
in the exact same
worst
fucking
kind
spot.
of parish pub clubism.
I was like,
Was
wait,
I
how's
supposed
he
to become a
fucking
member of such a
what?
club?
I am that good.
The question of new members was then discussed. That is to say, the question of catching myself in the trap.
Oh, so all those fucking lore
I
books
now
I did
began to
before
ask
don't count?
questions. But I found that, apart from a few general principles, there was nothing. No program, no pamphlet, nothing at all in print, no card of membership, not even a party stamp. Nothing but obvious good faith and good intentions. I no longer felt inclined to laugh. For what else was all this but a typical sign of the most complete perplexity and deepest despair in regard to all political parties, their programs and views and activities. The feeling which had induced these few young people to join in what seemed such a ridiculous enterprise was nothing but the call of the inner voice, which told them, though more intuitively than consciously, that the whole party system, as it had hitherto existed, was not the kind of force that could restore the German nation or repair the damages that had been done to the German people by those who hitherto controlled the internal affairs of the nation. I quickly read through the list of principles that formed the platform of the party. These principles were stated on typewritten sheets. Here again I found evidence of the spirit of longing and searching, but no sign whatever of a knowledge of the conflict that had to be fought. I myself had experienced the feelings which inspired those people. It was the longing for a movement which should be more than a party, in the hitherto accepted meaning of that word.
You know what?
When I returned to my room in the barracks that evening, I had formed a definite opinion on this association, and I was facing the most difficult problem of my life. Should I join this party or refuse? From the side of the intellect alone, every consideration urged me to refuse, but my feelings troubled me. The more I tried to prove to myself how senseless this club was, on the whole, the more did my feelings incline me to favor it. During the following days, I was restless. I began to consider all the pros and cons. I had long ago decided to take an active part in politics. The fact that I could do so only through a new movement was quite clear to me. But I had hitherto lacked the impulse to take concrete action. I'm not one of those people who will begin something today and just give it up the next day for the sake of something new. That was the main reason which made it so difficult for me to decide in joining something newly founded. For this must become the real fulfillment of everything I dreamt. Or else it had better not be started at all. I knew that such a decision should bind me forever, and that there could be no turning back. For me, there could be no idle dallying, but only a cause to be championed ardently. I had already an instinctive feeling against people who took up everything, but never carried anything through to the end. I loathed these jacks of all trades, and considered the activities of such people to be worse than if they were to remain entirely quiescent. Fate herself now seemed to supply the fingerpost that pointed out the way. I should never have entered one of the big parties already in existence, and shall explain my reasons for this later on. This ludicrous little formation, with its handful of members, seemed to have the unique advantage of not yet being fossilized into an organization, and still offered a chance for real personal activity.
Revolution!
Individual. Here it might still be possible to do some effective work, and as the movement was still small, one could all the easier give it the required shape. Here it was still possible to determine the character of the movement, the aims to be achieved, and the road to be taken, which would have been impossible in the case of the big parties already existing. The longer I reflected on the problem, the more my opinion developed that just such a small movement would best serve as an instrument to prepare the way for the national resurgence, but that this could never be done by the political parliamentary parties, which were too firmly attached to obsolete ideas or had an interest in supporting the new regime. What had to be proclaimed here was a new Weltanschauung and not a new election cry.
He demands to speak with
It
you
was,
directly.
however, infinitely difficult to decide on putting the intention into practice. What were the qualifications which I could bring to the accomplishment of such a task? The fact that I was poor and without resources could, in my opinion, be the easiest to bear. But the fact that I was utterly unknown
I wish to speak with
raised
you
a
on
more
a matter
difficult.
of some urgency. Menimarco and his vile master have dark and terrible plans for this world. If you wish to stop them, you need to find the Amulet of Kings. But to find the amulet, you must first locate Sai Sahan.
Why are you helping us?
Of course I do. And I might be willing to share that information for a price. If Menimarco learns that we've spoken, he'll have me executed. I'm a danger to him. I know too much. Therefore I, Abner Tharn, Chancellor of the Elder Council, Overlord of Nibene, formally request asylum.
Go on.
Do I look to be in a mirthful mood? There comes a point when even a patriot's loyalty is stretched too far, when the things he has done, and has seen done, become too much to bear.
Okay.
Would that I could. As it happens, I find myself to be somewhat of a prisoner, in dire need of rescue. My proposal is this. If you retrieve me from Menimarco's fortress and grant me asylum, I will give you Sai Sahan's location in return. You can't. And you'd be a fool to trust me completely. But the facts remain, you need me if you wish to find Sai Sahan, and I must keep my head if I am to ensure the continuance of the Empire.
The instant that fucking he
Neither of us
learns
has a
that we
choice.
have you, regardless of how we got you.
Tharn is quite correct. We have little choice in the matter.
You
I don't know
can't
about
be
that.
serious. How can we possibly trust him?
Shut up.
As our visitor so eloquently pointed out, we cannot.
Those people, I tell you. Just fucking get it done. God, this stuff tastes good.
You appear to have arrived in the wretched Squalor, a shantytown of Solshriven outside Menimarco's castle. As luck would have it, Manimarco is away on some errand for the Daedric Prince. The castle garrison is not on alert, so you should only encounter a token defense. The main gate is sealed, but there are undoubtedly other routes one might take. You're the hero, aren't you? Improvise.
Jerk.
What a skeever.
Alright. Why not? Talk to her friend.
Improvise, he says. I can't believe we're risking our lives to rescue that skeeving Horker.
So we could torture him. Get over yourself.
Subtlety and stealth. Let's not bring the entire castle guard down on our heads. And didn't he say this was a town of soul-shriven? Maybe we can find one who knows his way around. Try to be inconspicuous. We just got free of this place. The last thing we need is to get recaptured.
What's this wee business? I came to rescue you, bitch. Have a little faith. Dumbass.
I'll butcher these worms and stack their corpses so high Malakath himself couldn't see over them. That's easy. All you've got to do is get captured, killed, and stuffed into a soul gem like yesterday's laundry. If you're serious, Cadwell could probably get you in. Might be too late, though. They just chased him into the guardhouse.
Why am I not surprised to find Cadwell here? He certainly does get around.
Shut the fuck up.
Let one more of these runs and I'll be 15.
Come on. Wait. Where am I going? Where am I going?
Actually, how much does an individual soul gem sell for?
Like 200?
Oh no. 30 gold for a filled one.
Wait, what?
They sell for 30 gold for a filled one. Like, 30? Just to an NPC merchant. Because I had a thought, and I was thinking, man, if you could, you know, buy up a bunch of soul gems off the magic guy for like 50 apiece, fill them yourself, and then sell them back to the NPC for like a profit. Man.
What are you doing here? Intruders!
Well, I guess that went down the shitter.
Fuck you go. Now die. There. Almost time for another one of these.
I say, jolly good timing. Lyris enchanted, as always. And you're looking fit for someone, so how can I put it? Deficient in the soul department? Wherever the forces of evil prey upon the innocent, wherever souls are stolen and bodies shriven, wherever a people cry out for justice, there goest I. I mean, this whole eternal servitude business is rather nasty, don't you agree? Gebellas garters, why? Lovely grounds, no question, but it's positively brimming with angry cultists carrying rather large weapons.
Huh?
I see. A rescue, is it? Well, that's a different kettle of fish, isn't it? There is a cistern that drains into the waterway. The door is locked.
Holy
but that's
fucking
not stopped me before.
shit.
Why don't you meet me there and we'll see what's what?
Oh my god, that worked so well. Fucking hell, dude.
What?
I found the best way I can possibly contribute to this, doing this run. So, as an assassin, my character has the ability, if I hit an enemy while I'm stealth or hidden, I can, what's that ability? It is called Concealed Weapon. Attacking with concealed weapon while sneaking or invisible stuns the enemy for 4 seconds and sets them off balance for 5 seconds. Basically, they take shit tons of increased damage because they can't block it.
Yeah, I have one of those too.
Well, I've kind of been trying to pay attention to it, and from what I can tell is like, if I don't use it, the boss takes like a full 2 to 3 seconds longer to kill. When I use it, it's like he's been one shot.
Right.
Because of all the incoming damage.
Well, there you go.
And I get a lot more experience too if I do it that way than just trying to hit on him regularly, because I'm contributing to so much more damage coming in on him.
Right.
Like, seriously, it's the difference between like a quarter level moving on my bar and half an inch. It's great.
I gotta try that with my guy.
Assassins are fucking crazy, apparently.
Yeah.
That might be our
In a
best
group.
chance to get inside.
Okay, let's follow this fucker. What the fuck? Where you going? Motherfucker just disappeared. Yeah, whatever. Fuck that.
I'm trying to go full stamina efficiency and capacity on this build.
Right. Okay, here we go. Hey, pothead. How's it going? It's more of a pothead than I am.
You keep up nicely. I can't abide dawdlers. This whole bloody castle sits on top of an ocean of unstable oblivion, what's it? The Daedra use pipes to control the flow of it all, and it comes out as steam. Well, most of the doors in here are sealed with pressure from that steam. It's all rather complicated, but in a nutshell, if I can tamper with the pipes, we can open the doors to the inner keep, and you can slip inside. Well, I can handle the tinkering, but you'll have to keep the beasties off me. It will be quite a romp. Are you game?
Am I gay? No. Well, game. Are you gay?
Onward!
No, but I want to take you to a gay bar. Seriously, dude? Jesus, dude. Where the fuck do you go?
Yeah, it's time for me to go hunting.
High steps, come on.
Fuck off. Oh, come on. You silly fuck. What the fuck are you doing? Really? You gotta fucking run like a crazy... Fuck off.
Don't worry, this will get you inside with a minimum of fuss.
Can I get my stamina back? Or my fucking... Like, fuck. Calm the fuck that you motherfucker. I'm killing myself.
Oh shit.
One more after this one.
You suck that health good. Hold on, fuck. Come on. Where'd you go?
There you are. Quick as you please. There's even a pleasure thing, nothing of it. The merest trifle, truly. You'll find this Tharn fellow at the top of the Tower of Bones. You'll need to make your way through the keep's heart to get to it, but it's not terribly far. I understand the King of Worms has set him to the task of inspecting the soul gems that find their way into the castle, which is to say, well, all of them. You'll see crates of the things scattered around the premises. Indeed? Well, I might just take you up on that. But safety first. I'll stay here for the nonce and make sure nothing comes to bugger up our little adventure from behind.
Well, we do want to make sure we're not getting buggered from behind.
Sir Cadwell came through again. That crazy night is starting to grow on me. Should I be worried?
I don't know. Why the fuck are you talking to me about this shit, weirdo bitch?
Oh no, hear me out. How many Tharns does it take to rule an empire?
Shut up. I'm trying to work here.
There, see?
None. The one on the
Smoke
throne is
weed
pathetic.
every day.
The one in the tower isn't useful anymore.
Thank you for the host, Bert and Jet. Hey guys. Hope all is well with you.
Flank! No!
You like that? Was that good? What is this? Some stuff. No stuff in you, no stuff in you. What the fuck is the point of that? Star medal. Not worth anything. Well, maybe it's worth a bunch. Yeah. Worth 186 on average. So much ginger. Yeah, I'll take that. Thank you. You're too big to tap. Shit, so are you. got a good char now. Nice. Squeeze my lemon. Yeah, good for you. Huh. Worth nothing.
You, hurry up. The worms are on the move.
Keep moving. I'm right behind you.
No. 4. Wasting my time. That's cool looking. Yeah, I'll talk to you in a sec. That's interesting. That's a lot of people. Oh, it's the cable. I see. You know what? I want to fuck him up. I shall be right back. Ah. That's interesting. Okay. He took so long to go down. Alright, let's go.
There you are. I was beginning to think you were captured. We've a bit of a problem, I'm afraid. The door at the top of the tower has sealed with a warded barrier. I've seen the worms use similar sorceries before. It will sear you to ash if you touch it.
Bear with me again. Alfred's going for a walk. You have to, bud.
time to go get more skill point thingies.
Where are you off to?
Oh shit, there's one right here. Just all over the fucking place to try and find it. Right. It says there's one here. What? Arr? I don't see the glowy bit. Shit, it says there's another one here too. What?
Here's a thought. The flesh Atronachs that patrol the castle halls are assembled in a laboratory very close to the warded door. If you created your own Atronach, it would be
I don't believe it.
You could force it
I
to
think something's
smash
wrong
through
with
the
my
barrier.
map. Something is wrong with my map.
Sometimes it takes a while for mine to update.
Well, this isn't even updating. It's showing like 3 of them right
It's a
here
simple process.
near
A
me.
child of 5 could do it.
All the other ones are correct.
Unfortunately, we don't have a child of 5, so I'll be forced to walk you through it. You'll need some good-sized chunks of flesh. Take them to the laboratory, and I'll contact you then.
I'll have to ignore those.
It's freezing in here. At least that means the body parts won't smell as bad.
All this chick has done is complain the whole fucking time. I already looked there.
Shit's on fire, yo.
Is that a lung?
No judgment, bitch. That. But yeah, fuck. Yeah, 22 bucks. Better than nothing. How much does that go for? Nothing. Fuck you then. Morning. He's underneath the chair. No. That chair. See him in there? He got freaked out by the birds.
Gotta love being an assassin.
Going near the city butcher for a while, I'll tell you that much.
Fuck. We're not gonna fuck with this guy just yet. He should be super cuddly today, though. He was earlier. We went and looked at the bread machine making bread.
Imagine how the worms get used to this.
Alright, I think I'm going to go for a lay down.
Alright. I'll see you later, man.
Later.
I'm pretty sure he thinks of it as we do, but laying on your back. Because that's kind of like his default thing. Or standing up.
But he's like a pancake about me. Do you think he has a concept of how much he's grown?
Not really. Because he hasn't really grown much in relation to us.
I have pictures of him fitting in my palm of my hand. Not so much anymore, buddy.
Yeah, he's not gonna sit there. He's just resting to get his energy to go. Oh, really? They don't put up with none of that. He doesn't get on me and Bob. I'm not a fucking stick. We'll have respect in this house.
He's not bobbing at me, he's bobbing to whatever's around me.
I don't give a fuck. He's on you.
I'm his.
Not a stick. Hey, buddy? Not a stick. You sit on me and bobbing.
There's one video of this one dragon that was bobbing and waving at the same time.
Mm-hmm. He doesn't know what the fuck, whether he's coming or going.
Being dominant yet submissive.
Mm-hmm. So on my stream, I'm playing audiobook, Hitler's book. Hmm?
You're getting a lot of feedback?
A little bit. I'm not doing it to glorify it. I'm doing it because how many people have read it? Shouldn't it be required school reading? This is what the mind of a... This is what the mind of a fucking crazy person looks like on the inside. Okay. Still should be part of English.
They should teach kids how to, do basic budgeting and taxes too.
In math.
I didn't get taxes until I was in grade 11 accounting.
Taxes are simple though. They make it simple so that people can fucking do it.
Yeah. Basic budgets. Given the tools to actually understand what they need to start saving money.
You mean life skills? I think the big thing that people need to be taught is that money is imaginary and should not be associated with emotions. That's a hard lesson for people to learn. But Hitler actually goes into a good example of exactly what is wrong. He says that the people are so fucking overwhelmed with the fact that they have to work just to make ends meet that there's no time to do any planning. And because there's no time to do any planning, the instant they get their money, it's all gone. And they don't know why. I've seen another good example of it with a Now where you? Fuck you, what a weirdo. Yeah. He doesn't want to hide. I'm pretty sure he's going back to the window to Bob. You watch him. Is it not there? No. You sure? It might be under the plate.
The big container water?
Oh, no. That one right there?
That's the one, thank you. Gosh, you're supposed to be here first thing this morning doing the cable thing.
Uh-huh.
Something or anything.
Yeah. They only start at 8. There's a 2-hour window. Well, check your GPS tracker thingy.
I haven't even gotten the text that they're coming.
Then they're not coming.
Even the senior tech?
Oh, no, that's different. You won't get any notification. He'll just fucking show up.
I'm still scratching my head as to why they wouldn't just disconnect the person they connected onto mine, put me back, and run a cable 1 floor to 1106.
That's not the way it works.
Why? They took my line.
Yeah. So all the lines that are existing are shit?
Mm-hmm.
So what they did is they cut yours, which was brand new,
Yep.
and hooked it up to theirs.
Yeah.
And fuck you. At least their job is done. That's why you don't hire contractors to do, you know, mission critical stuff. So checking the line for signals and stuff, yeah, who gives a fuck? But when they're running new lines and stuff and they have a fucking deadline, you need to get this many jobs done today, they're gonna do it as quick as possible and fuck the rest.
It was just, but it wasn't even a senior tech that did that. It was just a regular tech who came in to
I know,
somebody
that's
else's
exactly what I mean.
And
They shouldn't be in charge of hooking people's cable up. It should be a representative from Rogers going there and making Rogers look good to brand new customers. You know what I mean? But no, they have contractors from other companies coming in under Rogers and then doing shit like this and getting people pissed off and making them want to fucking leave Rogers. But the management would never hear about it because the dispatch has their asses. Dispatch never sends any of that kind of shit up the chain because nobody really gives a fuck. Worst case scenario, you're not using up their bandwidth. That's 2 weeks that you've been
3 weeks and 2 days.
3 weeks and 2 days that you've been paying for services, but they haven't had to give you any.
I won't be paying for these services for long.
I know.
I'm in a good enough mood to call somebody and complain today. But I'm trying to do it diplomatically so that I don't piss them off. And I get what I'm fully entitled to.
Entitled? You're paying for it.
I'm not going to be paying for it.
Doesn't matter. You've agreed to pay for it. You've agreed to pay for it, and they're failing to provide their side. Yes, I know, but they're failing to provide a vital service that you're paying for. Make it more about that and less about... Make it that they're not doing their job that you've paid them to do. They're not living up to their end of the contract. Not that you're paying for something and not getting it. Do you understand what I mean? I know it sounds like the same thing, but they're two completely different concepts. Like CRTC will absolutely make sure that you're getting what you're paying for. That's their job.
I shouldn't be involving CRTC. Or shouldn't say anything involving CRTC.
Not to Rogers, God no. But you can absolutely contact the CRTC and let them know that you know, this is a situation that you're in, and you just want your service hooked up. I don't know why this is so difficult. They disconnected my service I don't know why they would do that to hook somebody else's service up. That's very strange. Don't you find that very strange, Mr. Other Person on the phone?
And my question was, why can't they disconnect what they did and hook mine back up?
And then you sound like a fucking...
And make me wait another 3 weeks.
But now you sound vindictive. Now you sound vindictive. You're willing to put another person in the same...
Why are they more important than me?
You're willing... Are you venting, or is this the kind of thing...
I'm venting.
Okay.
Why are they more important than me? Why was giving them services more important than providing mine? Especially since I already waited 2 weeks to get it hooked up in the first place. And then I had it for a week and a half, and now it's gone for 3 weeks.
Right.
Because somebody came in and disconnected my line to give somebody else a line?
No, he
Why
can't...
are they more important than me?
He didn't disconnect it to... He disconnected it because he gets paid shit money, and he doesn't care whether Rogers looks good or not. They're told, either you do all of these jobs today or you're fired. And that's the way they motivate people in that company.
Then why didn't their tech say the same thing mine did? We'll have to feed another line to you because there's no line.
Because that would take him a long time to do.
No, it doesn't. It's just a phone call to a senior tech going, we need another line fed to this unit because there's no service to this unit.
And now he has to wait until the senior tech gets there and actually runs the line.
You have to rebook that. You have to wait for that.
Okay, then he hasn't finished his job.
He's finished it to the best of his ability.
No.
Because that's exactly what 2 techs have done to me already.
Yeah.
The first tech came in, went, oh, there's no service to this line. I can't do anything.
Right.
Then the second tech came in, when after it was disconnected, they came to check it. No, there's no line service to this, there's no signal to this line. There's nothing I can do about it. I have to call senior tech.
Right.
So why is that so easy to do for me and not so easy to do for somebody else?
Because they found a line for them.
But it was already connected. How do they, can they not see that?
No.
Don't they fucking realize that this is somebody else's line?
They don't care. That's the thing. But it's Rogers that's caused them not to care. Because they're hiring fucking contractors. Instead of paying their own guys money, they're paying these guys fucking peanuts. So yeah, I mean, it's like McDonald's hiring kids. You're not going to get the best product. It doesn't matter what the fuck you do, they're always going to fuck something up. Like I ordered McDonald's from Krista's McDonald's. The fries were fucking soggy. And no, they weren't even cooked. Yeah, they were just barely cooked. They were like, put them in the fucking oil. There you go.
When did you order?
I don't know, the middle of the night.
Did I tell you about Krista's order the other night?
Hmm.
$1,100.
For what?
150 fries, 150 McDoubles, 150 junior chickens, 100 and what was it? 120 nuggets.
Serious?
For a wedding.
Oh.
Midnight
Oh,
buffet.
God.
They started cooking at 8:30.
Jesus.
Because she saw that, she's like, you know, we can't cook this all at the same time, and it's not going to be the greatest. She says, she says, no one's going to care. They're all going to be drunk.
Drunk food's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the idiot technicians, the contracted ones, all they care about is whether they can kick it off to a senior tech. So that... Done my job. But if they go there and they say they found a cable with signal, because they have a thing that they wrap it around, they go, yeah, this one's got signal.
Do you not get that there's another 5 fucking units above that one?
No.
That may be serviced with that cable?
Doesn't care, because he's done his job. He's... There, I got signal. Bye-bye. You're hooked up. You're hooked up. That's his job. That's what he's been paid to do.
Then why wouldn't he have done that? Am I the only cable that was running up the floors?
You're the last one. We're the top floor.
Was I the only one, though?
Yes. At that
14,
point...
13, 12, 11?
Yeah, but
There's
at that point, there's only one. The next floor down, there's 2. Next floor down, there's 3. Next floor down, there's 4. See where I'm going with that?
Well, why did it have to take mine?
He didn't know. He didn't care. He just found a cable. They go in, grab the bundle of cable, and they put their tester near it. Oh, this one has signal. Clip it, put it on, wash your hands of it.
It was a brand new cable.
Yeah,
Should've
that's
put it in
probably
for
why he
something
grabbed
else.
it. That's probably why he grabbed it, because he'd have fantastic signal, and then he'd say, oh, your signal is so good. Look at this. Look how good your signal is. You're going to have fantastic service.
I'm just, you know, but me, the person who is
You're not his customer, though.
injured by this,
Yeah.
I have questions, and I need answers to these questions.
Well, see, you'd be
why
perfectly
would they-
within your... I don't know why you're not fucking just using your cell phone to its max. It's faster than the internet you're going to get, your LTE.
Okay, so?
Well, you just make it a hotspot, and you just fucking use that for now.
10 gigs.
So, they're the ones responsible for you not having fucking service, so you're using whatever means you have.
Yeah.
You're trying to mitigate your losses as best you can. That's the only avenue that you have. That's the only access to internet that you have. And it's with the same company. So therefore they should be able to refund you for any overages. And if they're not willing to do that, then you talk to the CRTC, and they're in shit for one. They broke their 24-hour fucking rule. Anyways, you'll never have an issue.
Well, I'm never gonna have an issue anymore again because that cable running through the closet.
I don't know where the fuck they're getting the closet cable from. They're gonna run 15 stories of fucking cable down through the closets.
No, 25. The service room's on 10.
Okay.
So they're gonna run it up 5.
Through everybody's closet. I don't understand how they're doing that.
Until one day somebody decides to cut it.
No, I don't think it's gonna be visible in anybody's apartment.
Except mine.
They're gonna drill a hole through your wall, feed a cable down 5 stories, and then fish it out somewhere in the ceiling. Yeah. I don't know, that's some weird fishing. I was told that fucking Rogers does not fish. And I was told to tell customers that we do not fish cables. We cannot physically touch anything that goes inside the wall, because then we would be liable, and our guys are not electricians. You need to be an electrician in order to install in-wall cable in case it catches fire. I don't think anybody's been given permission. Because I don't think they can give that permission. Like, I can't give you permission to fucking wire up an outlet here and still be covered under, like, insurance.
This is cable. This isn't.
It carries a significant amount of voltage and could catch fire. And because it spans multiple floors, that fire will travel in crawl spaces and shit. Needs to be rated for a certain... Anyway, there's a book of fucking regulations that they need to follow. They need to make sure that it's, you know, there needs to be a certain amount of air, but not too much, not too little. It needs to be enough so that when that off gases, it doesn't cause any kind of harm to any of the people who are going to be able to breathe that air. But that air is supposed to be completely separate and cut off from any breathable air in the building.
So having one on the outside wall versus having one in a closet wall. I'm not seeing the difference.
Well, on the outside, if it catches fire, who fucking cares?
It's still going to travel up.
That's fine.
It's still going to affect that many units.
No, they get a seal. No, they're only worried about breathing this shit in. That's what most of the regulations are for. And being able to allow fire to travel.
But it can still go down on the outside wall as well as it can on the inside wall. And I'd be a little bit more concerned about the wiring that they have in the units already.
Why?
Well, the breakers supplying that many outlets.
There's actually not that many outlets. It is perfectly balanced. Like, it's...
Except for if you run an air conditioner, you know, it's something in the bathroom.
Not supposed to run an air conditioner off 15 amps. Well, the whole point is that every outlet should have its own breaker. Or every room should have its own breaker. But that's... Is it? He never does that. Maybe he's stuck. Might want to try giving him water.
Yeah, I'm frustrated at this point.
Oh yeah, I hear you. You should be. That's bull.